seats so we can begin our meeting. PJ? Okay, give me a lesson. I got you. We're having a lesson over here.
Break the table.
Okay. We got it. We got it. All right. Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the April 16th Cincinnati School Board Committee of the Whole Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Treasurer Wagner, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mr. Crosset?
Here.
Mr. Lindy?
Here.
Ms. Mapp?
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg? Vice President Bolton?
Present.
President Moffitt?
Here. Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion and a second to approve the April 16th Committee of the Whole Business Meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Let's take a vote. I'm sorry. Treasurer Wagner.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Crosset?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
Yes.
Yes.
Vice President Bolton?
Yes.
President Moffitt?
Yes. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our first presentation.
Yes, ma'am, happy to. Today, we have our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Chris Burkhart, who is going to give an update on our student dining services.
Good afternoon.
It also comes with great sadness that I'm not bringing you food for this meeting. As we transition to the first slide, starting the day off with breakfast, obviously the most important part of the day, making sure that our students start off with breakfast. As of now, we have served, and the number up there is as of March 12th, so I have the new updated number. It's well over 2 million meals, breakfasts that we've served within the district this year alone. One of the things that we really focused on this year, and Director Shelley has done a great job with her team on making sure that our students have multiple options every day so that we have them starting off on the foot that they want to start off with, not the foot that we want to give them. So there's multiple options available every day, including every day we have a protein option. Now and I say that to let you know that the state and the USDA does not require that. That's an extra in their mind, that we are really focused on grain-based items in the morning, and we go above and beyond to make sure that we have at least a protein option every day. And that goes to a lot of our student athletes as well who need that protein throughout the day. With that, we have one of the highest participation of breakfast across the country. At our high school, where about 40% of our students are eating breakfast every single day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is very, very, very significant in the number of students who we want to make sure have breakfast every day. As you see up on the screen, there is a picture of our breakfast challenge. So every month, schools compete against each other to make sure that students are eating, and those that are the highest actually get money to spend on their school how they want. So this is one of those days where the Bengals had come in and helped us celebrate that grant funding. As we transition to the next slide, we'll move on to lunch. So our lunch numbers are well over 3 million lunches served this year. One of the items that we've gone above and beyond from a lunch standpoint is vegetarian and vegan options every single day for our students. So again, that goes well above and beyond the USDA and ODEW requirements for lunch. Some of the initiatives we've been working on over the past couple of years, and this is really ramped up both last year and again this year, is making sure that we have clean label items. We want to make sure that our items do not have additional added flavors and colors and dyes and nitrates, those things that we would consider non-healthful. We want to make sure that our food is healthy, wholesome, and are free from those other items. As we look for the future, we will continue to move to those items that are organic in nature and really looking at how do we simplify the menu but give complex flavors. As we move to fresh fruit and vegetable program, which is offered at our K-8 schools, we allow students to try new items that they might not have tried before. So what we do here is we marry the new food item with curriculum. And so it's try this new food item, let us tell you a little bit about it, maybe where it came from. So we give the teachers a one-pager in relation to the items that students are trying. And what this allows us to do is fold in these new items into the curriculum. So it might be some math curriculum, might be geography, just to be able to get these new items in front of students. As we transition to the next slide in supporting local farmers and companies, over $3 million locally. So locally in this context is 250 miles from Cincinnati in any direction. The reason that we utilize that number is because it's the USDA number for local. And as we look at the growing season for Cincinnati, we know that we have a pretty tight growing season. So some of our foods will come from Kentucky, a little bit into Tennessee to make sure that we're looking at a much longer growing season than maybe Cincinnati and or Columbus. One of the highlights here is 90% of our milk comes from Ohio. So local dairy farmers, local cows, processed in Ohio, so never leaves the state. So that's one of those items that we are very, very proud of. As we move to the next slide and looking at our awards and recognitions, I don't have to tell you our student dining is among the best in the country. Director Shelley and her team really do a great job, and really it's good that they are being recognized for all of the hard work that they do every single day. And that really goes to the next slide in trying new recipes, new food items. We've added 7 new breakfast items and 21 new lunch items this year alone to the menu. And that shows how we can change our menus to meet the student needs and wants, as well as making sure that those items in our schools are the same types of items that they see in the grocery stores, the same brand names, the same high quality foods that they'll see in the grocery stores are also served in our schools. We also have a chef on staff, so a certified chef who actually helps develop these meals, which I'm not sure that everyone is aware of. And that really goes to trying to be on the forefront of looking at flavors, looking at trends, looking at the ways that we're able to meet the students where they are and give them the foods they want to eat, not the nutrition that they have to have. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Board Member Crossett, thank you. Board Member Crossett.
I was just curious, do you ever do like a survey or get feedback from the students as to what they really like and then, what they really did not like?
Yeah, so the taste tests happen all the time, and that's how we came up with all those 21 items at lunch. So when those surveys happen, we have to have an 85% acceptance rate before it goes on the menu. And as we are looking at items, 85% is a pretty high bar. So we know that when we put something on the menu, it is something that students want to eat. And sometimes that's just a thumbs up or a thumbs down where we tally those, and sometimes it's actually a comment card or getting real feedback in writing from them. Obviously that happens more at the high schools than at the elementary level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Board Member Matt.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I am happy to see the access, right, that the students are getting with the breakfast and lunch program. My question is, do we, I guess, maybe survey the students to identify how having the breakfast and the lunch throughout the day is impacting their overall wellness, or how it's helping to improve their sense of academic success?
Yeah, absolutely. So breakfast obviously is something that we've spent a lot of time on, and obviously as I look at that 40%, at the high schools, that goes to making sure that we not only say that we have breakfast, but also provide real access to breakfast. So that's one thing that I think a lot of districts across the country don't do as well as we do is making sure that we have access to breakfast. And what that means is we have kiosks in the schools. They don't necessarily have to go to the cafeteria to eat. So we've looked at breakfast in the classroom, we've looked at kiosks, we looked at some of those other areas. What we haven't done, and it's I think a growth for us, is to tie the breakfast participation to academics and looking at seeing how those marry together. We haven't done a good job of doing that, but that's obviously something that we know there's a correlation. All the studies across the world have said there's a correlation. We just haven't done it here in Cincinnati to be able to show what that correlation looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that's something that we can initiate soon. I think that would be interesting data for us to see. And also, I'm curious to know if in tracking that data, would that be something that would apply to the WellSat assessment tool?
Yeah, it's actually not a WellSat question, but I wouldn't be surprised because the WellSat is updated. We're required to do it every 3 years, but it's updated almost every year. I'm sure they're going to add that at some point. One of the challenges is when we look at that is having that correlation between breakfast and test scores, for example. You know, how do we look at that? We can look and see that there's less trips to the nurse's office. We can see less behavior problems. We can see some of those things that are anecdotally. Putting a marker on that becomes a little bit harder to do.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Bolton.
Thank you very much for the presentation. On a financial angle of this, is it your office or the treasurer's office or the superintendent's office that's monitoring the federal decisions out of the agriculture department, which is, not just the education department, but it's the ag department that has so much to do about our kids' breakfasts and our lunches? Or do we have an update as to where the federal government is about that?
From my lens, we do not have an update, which is positive.
Okay.
We would like to keep things as much of a status quo as possible right now. In student dining, and we're looking at the laws and regulations that make up what we do, student dining's laws and regulations are almost equivalent to putting a man on the moon. And when you look at NASA's regulations and those from USDA, USDA is the second most regulated federal program next to NASA. So when you look at all those regulations, it is very, very tough for a school district, much less school districts across the country, to change every time there's a new regulation that comes in. So from that standpoint right now, we are happy that there have not been changes, although the Make America Healthy Again regulations that have been proposed are just that right now, proposals. We haven't seen anything really meaningful come out, but we are looking at it every single day. The School Nutrition Association is one entity that gives us daily updates, as well as USDA will send out updates as well. So we get those. Obviously, Director Shelley is well in tune to it, as well as myself.
It's great. I appreciate you following that, and I hope, too, that there won't be changes, but I assume there will be. Much of what we do here, we made decisions over a number of years, actually cost us more money doing it the right way and the CPS way, and I think that's best dollars spent. So I would hope that we don't think that reducing this is a financial piece, which would save some money. Even the local piece is more costly than kind of doing, you wouldn't think it would be, but a lot of that stuff, we knew there were, Jessica was very good about sharing, this will cost this much more money to do it this way, but the boards previously had determined this was worth those dollars spent.
And thank you for that, and it's a great time to bring up that student dining is self-sufficient. Student dining doesn't receive any money from the general fund. They fund themselves, and to your point, they every year are looking to how do you reinvest the money back into the program and back into the students. So I thank the board and superintendent and Treasurer Wagner for working together to make sure that we can do that every single year.
That's great. Super. The last two are just totally soft on the question, but very difficult vote many years ago was the vote the board had to take on closing the CPS bake shop. It was relatively famous regionally and probably made more baking than any number of private concerns around, but we had to make that decision. That's more than a decade ago. But the other piece is, appreciate the chef piece, and it is, I think, a little tiny project with food folks to start to put together a CPS, believe it or not, cookbook of historic recipes that have been served generation after generation. So appreciate their creativity and team spirit. Thanks.
Thank you. So I just have two quick things to ask a question about. Thank you for the presentation. I will say, we always get fed with Jessica, so that's a downer right about now. We always get some really good food. I'm just kidding. Is there? Yeah, that was. She was coming up with some good stuff too. So our food is really good. To that point, is there any connectivity between our culinary departments at the schools and dining services? And I ask that question because we had a really good presentation, actually the day, I think it was Dater, was it Dater? Culinary department, and we'll hear about that at the meeting, I'm sure, had light bites at the 22nd Century event that the students prepared, and it was really, really good. And I'm wondering, is there any connectivity between what's grown in the schools, because we have many schools that grow their own food, and the usage in the buildings?
Yeah, so I'll answer that with a yes and a no. So there are some connectivities. For example, our school gardens, we are looking at ways to make sure that that garden is certified so that we can not only have students try those foods from the garden, but also for student dining to purchase those so that they can use them in the cafeteria. So that's the yes part of it. The part for growth is looking at those areas like what you're saying with some of those culinary areas and really having that be more seamless than what it is. Right now, it's really two different entities operating two different programs. And Director Shelley and I have talked about how can we start bringing that closer together and having some shared resources and having some areas where those students can get real life experience in our cafeterias. So we have had those discussions. We're not there yet, but it's definitely on the radar.
Thank you for that, because I'm really interested to see if there was any possibility for workforce development, career tech, the SEAL usage, and then I had an opportunity to go through with Green Umbrella, visit a school in California that they grew almost all of their stuff for the district and had an outside kitchen, and then they used it as a community space with regard to a curriculum. So I'm wondering, are we able to do some of that with our students that are already in the culinary? So it sounds like you guys are on that track, so that's what I wanted to put out. And the other thing, is there any discussion around educating the parents and the community on what the kids are eating or what we're doing with regard to dining services? And I asked that question in part because Kentucky talked about banning soda and sugary snacks, but I think there's a parental engagement piece that might be, I just have a question about it. So do we do that with regard to educating the community and our parents around the dining services program and what their kids are eating?
So the answer to that is an emphatic yes. So student dining is a little different from most of the operations within the district, is they have their own marketing department within student dining. And that marketing is not only to students and making sure that they are aware of what they're eating and making sure that they know that there's clean label options, there's vegetarian, vegan options, but also to the parents, to your point, is making sure that they are telling parents about all the great work that's being done, as well as trying to get that outreach to say, yes, look at our foods, and yes, we are winning awards for it, and yes, this is restaurant quality food that you're getting in a K-12 school in Cincinnati. So they pride themselves in making sure that they're hitting everyone, the district as a whole, the Cincinnati community, as well as students and their families.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are my questions. I appreciate all the work you all are doing. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our second presentation.
Yes, ma'am. At this time, we'll have a presentation on our guardrails 1 and 2 by Interim Assistant Superintendent Chambers.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
We're presenting on guardrails 1 and 2, so I'll go through them relatively quickly, but I want to make sure that all the information that you get tonight answers questions and concerns you may have. So guardrail 1, the superintendent will not ignore the needs and talents of the whole child by providing for students' mental and physical well-being through academics, the arts, athletics, civic engagement, career opportunities, and leadership development. Next slide, please. So guardrail 1A looks at the percentage of high school students participating in arts and athletics-based activities and extracurriculars. We will say it will increase from 56.8% to 60%. Just want to remind you that when we looked at that original number in the fall of '23, it included all of the students that were enrolled in a fine arts course and the after-school clubs and activities along with athletics. So the actual number for that we were looking at was for the baseline was 25.8%, and that was the spring of '23-24. And if you look at where we are, we were in the winter of '24-25. We're at 43.5% of our students participating in either athletics or arts-based extracurriculars. And just to look at that a little bit deeper. Next slide, Ron. This gives an outline of the number of students per grade level, and it is actually a true number of students that participated in athletics and students that participated in the fine arts and clubs that are after-school extracurricular based. And when we say true, when you look at athletics, the number that you'll pull will have, it'll be a lot bigger because it counts the number of kids who participates in multiple activities, multiple athletics, sports as far as like football. Kid will play basketball, that kid will be counted multiple times. So when we pull the true number, this only counts the kids that participated once, right? So I just wanted to give you those numbers. And if you look, we had over 10,000 kids participate in athletics or extracurriculars. So guardrail 1B, I'm going to ask your indulgence. We've given the schools an extension on the Qualtrics survey because of testing and the teachers preparing for testing. So we wanted to give those schools the time to complete the testing and give the survey so we can have more accurate numbers with a larger sampling of kids. So our key takeaways, with athletics, we did see an increase in the winter with wrestling and bowling adding to that number. And, athletics and fine arts have done a real collaboration on, with the data, getting it into final forms. And our next steps, we're continuing to work with the athletic directors to push participation in the extracurriculars. And the girls flag football, which is a new initiative, and we had over 100 young ladies participate in the flag football program. And I would also like to add that our fine arts program will continue to look to increase the extracurricular offerings by partnering with our partners in ABC, as well as other community partners. Any questions on guardrail 1?
Board members, any questions? Let's move on to guardrail 2.
All right.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No,
Board member
sorry.
Craig.
So going back to participation, I know last time we talked about this, we also talked about there were programs and stuff that were extracurricular elements to something that wasn't otherwise a class program. So for instance, being in band and having to do concerts, or theater, you didn't do performances. And so I don't know, are we counting those in the number, or are we not counting those in the number?
We are not, only because of the in-class element. It's hard to delineate which ones are, so we didn't include them in the number.
Okay, and then I think, and again, I think some of that is an aspect of, it's a class part, and we're thinking about these as strictly as stuff that is after school or outside of school. The other one was clubs and organizations that might be, for some schools, those are competitive clubs that do a lot of those activities that would take them in competition with other schools. Are those in these numbers?
They
now?
are,
Okay.
yes.
I know we were having trouble with trying to track who participated in which club for a while there, and so I
Yeah,
think
we
we've
are-
made strides.
We're really looking, we're working with the school's athletic directors and the club advisors to make sure that they upload their rosters and their, the student information into final forms, so we can have that accurate count.
And I think that's, again, one of those great things that would be helpful once we bring athletic directors back in to be more of an activities director, is that they have a little bit more of an authority within the school to be able to create a system, track the information better, know who's doing what, schedule things. So I think it's, again, another win that comes with having those brought back in-house.
Absolutely.
Board Member Matt?
Yes, so I have a question for Guardrail 1B, and I know that there's not much information as of right now because of the extension, but I am curious to know, with the question about having a favorable response and sense of well-being at the school, is this one targeted question on the Qualtrics survey, or is it more qualifying questions that you all kind of have a cumulative response of determining that sense of well-being?
There are multiple questions, and we look at the questions that address this particular issue, and we pull them out and look at the numbers, the average response rate, or not average response rate, but the average response from the students on those particular questions.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Mr. Chambers, Guardrail 2.
All right. In Guardrail 2, the superintendent will not allow discriminatory or culturally insensitive disciplinary treatment that results in disproportionate punishment among students to go unaddressed. In Guardrail 2A, looks at the percent of K-12 Black, Hispanic, and multiracial students with a Category 2 infraction compared to white students. And we say that will decrease from 15.4% or 15% to 12.5%. We have, if you look at the spring of 22-23, we are at 15 with the combined delta, and we are currently at 11 now. So we had that 4% or 4-point drop in the student infractions of a Category 2 nature. The number of combined students of color, we've gone from 20% to 16%. And, and that's compared to white students who, their number has gone from 6% to 5%. So the gap is closing. We had a 4% change in our combined students of color compared to a 1% change, in our white students. And Guardrail 2B looks at the percent of K-12 Black male students with a Category 2 infraction compared to white male students. And we said will decrease from 20% in May 23 to 13 in May of 25. That particular combined delta has also gone down. If you looked at from 23, we were at 17, and currently we are at 10. We had a significant drop in the combined delta. And then if you look at the Black male students and the white male students, we were in 23, 24, we had in the winter, we're at 24% Black males and 7% white males. And then to the current day, we are at 23% Black males and 13% white males. So there was a, from now there's a 10-point gap, where before we were looking at a much larger gap between our white male students and our Black male students. In the spring data, we did have a 4% increase with the Black males, but we had a 7% increase with our white males. So even though both groups had an increase over winter to spring, we did have slightly less percentage on our black male students than we did our white male students. And Board Member Mapp, this may look a little bit like the answer to the question that you asked. Guardrail 2C looks at the percentage of students in grades 7 through 12 who have a favorable response for a teacher-student relationship on the Qualtrics survey. Will increase from 48 on Panorama in 23 to 52% by May of 25. You know, we're now using Qualtrics, and what we've done to get this particular information, we looked at the questions that addressed student-teacher relationships in the Qualtrics survey. So these questions are directly taken from the survey, and our fall average for that those particular questions was 58.42% favorable, and our target was 52%. And our key takeaways, you know, we see that the equity gap continues to improve, and our tier fidelity inventory data has provided PBIS implementation strengths and growth opportunities. So we're really looking at data to make sure that we are giving the proper interventions that the school needs versus any one prescriptive program. And our next steps is, you know, to continue to provide support to school teams, and the adoption of the SEL curriculum to address the classroom supports for teachers, and our continued partnership with Cincinnati Children's on data analysis and strategy development.
Thank you.
that will
Board
be it.
members, any questions? I have a question. I'm sorry, Board Member Crossett.
Maybe you could go back to the screen with the comparison between black males and white males. And the delta is now at 10 points, but I'm just curious, it's for both categories, white male, black male, a pretty big jump here in the spring for both categories. Do we have any insight as to why? Or is it a particular type of incident, or?
We are working with Children's to disaggregate that data to look at the type of offense, and if it was a particular increase in one particular type of infraction, that would have made that number jump. So we are looking at that in a little more in depth.
Is that it? So I have a question. I'm sorry. Do you want to go? My apologies.
Okay.
Board Member Matt.
So as it relates to the disciplinary data, I know several meetings back, we talked about the challenge that it was to implement this data into focus, and so I'm curious to know what things were put in place to help us have an actualized picture of the data now.
I think it was a better understanding of focus and how, you know, to pull that particular data, and working with Children's to make sure that the data is being pulled properly. And that was, you know, an IT thing, and they figured out how that data is, you know, to be pulled and to get the proper numbers that we need.
Okay. The other question that I have, I'm looking at the key takeaways and the next steps. I'm curious to know what percentage of work do the counselors have in supporting, you know, our students' well-being, as well as the PBIS framework. And the reason why I asked that question is because going back to the conversation about the reduction that we have in counselors, so I'm curious to know if there's been conversations about how this could maybe impact the data with having limited resources, and what the plan will be to ensure that we're not creating further inequities.
I'm not sure of a particular percentage, but I know that the counselors are integral to the implementation of PBIS in any of our intervention programs with behavior.
Okay. So with that being said, and knowing that there's a reduction, are we accounting for how we still ensure that this work is being done? And this may be a question for Superintendent Murphy.
So all of our staff members are trained in our PBIS model, our restorative practices model. So I would say every staff member is critical to playing a role in supporting kids in this work and their attitudes and how they feel about school and their sense of belonging, all of our children. Would I go to a counselor first to discuss this data? Maybe not. I may go to a school social worker first or a school psychologist first or second to get support around the why or how we can improve this data.
I'm curious to know why there's a separation in terms of who you would go to first. They all do pretty much the same work. So in terms of, I think, ensuring that there's conversations, I would think that there should be, equal voice amongst that discussion, but just feedback, just thoughts.
I definitely agree. Every staff member in our buildings play a part in children being successful in terms of their behaviors and sense of well-being. If I had to look at ownership in buildings, I don't know that I would go to an academic counselor first, a guidance counselor first about student behaviors. Would I invite them to the table? Would I respect their opinion about it? Absolutely.
Okay, so the academic counselors are able to do all of that work, so I think that they're equally important to the conversation as well. But just question about it, just noticing the data and knowing that these are the interventions that's been put in place.
Board Member Lindy.
Thank you. I had some follow-up questions from the presentation last month. I'm happy to wait if you had questions about this here, or I'm happy to go now, whatever you prefer.
So I'm going to just ask my question about this one, and then we can open it up to his presentation previously, just because we're here. Does anyone else have any questions? So, no, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if it was already brought up, but I had a question about the SEL curriculum. Did we talk about that?
It was just mentioned with the adoption and how that will, just one of our next steps to impact.
And I was just curious about it in terms of, can we be provided with a little bit more information in regards to what does it offer? What is the curriculum specifically? And what is the goal and what is it trying to address?
And we'll get that information for you.
So my question is, if we go back to the previous slide, Rob, I think one more. So that, well, I think that, it's great that it's going down 10 points. That's not the number that really interests me. And I'm sure everybody's like, okay, here we go. But I'm wondering why the white male students is increasing. And what that makes me ask a question about is there consistency about how it is being reported? So I've asked this question probably for the past few years around, is there, with regard to discipline and Category 2 infractions, how are we measuring to ensure that there is consistency across the district on how that is being captured? Because what that makes me think is that there probably isn't consistency, and it's not a dig, but it's like, okay, we got to get that number down. So that number went down, but the other ones are going up. And so if that trend's completely out of the norm of what it has been, and it's almost an outlier for me. So because it's an outlier, it's not even 10, which the other one in 2022 was 9. It's double what it was. So how are we capturing that? So I'm very interested in how consistent is the capturing of the data. And that goes back to how are teachers being trained or taught to capture that? And then are we sure that a Category 2 infraction at one school is consistent at another school? And I don't know exactly how that needs to be measured, but that data it makes me pause on the validity, because I'm just wondering, and I'm not saying you all are doing anything wrong, I'm just wondering, we've been asking before about how is it captured? Is it consistent? Is teacher, I know some students are like, well, I know that I can do this in Ms. Jones' class, but I can't do that in another class because she's going to count it against it. And so we need to have almost an inventory around the capturing of the data to ensure that the validity of the data is accurate and consistent. So that's what makes me wonder and ask that question. I'm not saying that that's something you can ask right now, you can answer right now, but that is something that I'm very interested in around all of our data, but particularly with regard to this category, this particular guardrail, in that the number doubled for the population that we're trying to normalize against. That doesn't make sense to me. So the other, well, that's just gonna be my question. So I guess I'm looking for that, maybe some sort of measurement for that, for the next one. So that's my question. Board Member Lindy, you had a question previously.
Yeah, thank you very much. We had a good discussion last month, I think, about the guardrail that is around Algebra 1 and the interim targets that were set in particular cohorts around iReady and being on grade level. And I really appreciated that conversation. I also really appreciate the emails that I received some follow-up from the administration, which I really appreciate, including a chance to ask some follow-up questions and clarify, and I appreciate all of those things. I do have some questions about that I think are worth spending a minute on, but I will try to be as brief as possible. I know this was the superintendent and I have been emailing about this. I know it's top of mind for us, or at least fresh for us, but for people who may not have thought about this in a month. A month ago, we were here, we were looking at the math scores, and there was a pretty big drop in the cohort we're tracking around their first-time Algebra 1 success rate. And we were talking about what explains that drop-off. And I think we had a good conversation about, could this be explained by the students who are moving out of that cohort and into an advanced math cohort, so that their scores are no longer reflected in there. Again, really do appreciate the follow-up from the administration. One piece, there are two big thoughts I want to share, but I just want to ask a question first. In the follow-up that I received by email, which I really appreciate, it sounds like the transition to advanced math happens between 7th and 8th grade. In the meeting last month, the conversation was about the transition happening between 6th and 7th grade. I just heard two different things, and I just wanted to understand when does the transition to advanced math happen? Is that a 6 to 7 move? Is that a 7 to 8 move?
Go ahead, Superintendent Murphy.
What I focused on would be the 8th graders who, the 7th graders moving to 8th grade, who instead of taking 8th grade math, may be assigned to take algebra. Now, it could be that there are some 7th graders who are also taking advanced math.
Yes.
But what I focused on in terms of our response to you, Mr. Lindy, was the algebra changes. And so we went back to 8th grade, looking at that change from 7th going into 8th.
So in the meeting was change happens between 6 and 7. In the email, it was change happens between 7 and 8. And I think what I'm hearing now is change can actually happen in either case. Some kids move into advanced math going into 7th grade, and some different kids move into advanced math going into 8th grade. I have no preference, by the way, about which of these is true. Any of them could be great. I just want to make sure I understand which one is the one that happens.
Yeah, it sounds like it's both.
Yes.
What I will tell you, in our recent emails, I looked at algebra and then went back to think about that 8th grade response and why there was a difference.
Yeah, I think this I think is a great illustration of why I think this is worth talking about, and I really appreciate the chance to dialogue about this in a meeting like this. And I'm, again, really glad we have meetings that are focused on student outcomes. Those differences, I think, matter a lot in terms of whether or not we have a good explanation for why the numbers go down. If all those kids moved and you shared the numbers and it's 20% of the class, so it's much bigger the number than we were tossing around last week, so that it's almost twice as large. So if it's the case that all happens between 7th and 8th grade, that actually could explain what the drop is. Now, if it's half and half, I'm even more confused because we didn't see a drop last year, but we did see a drop this year. And again, I think the bigger picture is less this particular instance and just do we or do we not have really good visibility into, I mean, this is one of the most important outcomes we set goals around as a district. do we really understand where we're headed and whether we're on track to hit our goals or not? I think the, yeah, I think I am of growing concern that our visibility into whether or not we can set goals and meet them is not as strong as it needs to be. And there's a related reason. The purpose of all of this, I'm trying to zoom out of the weeds and be bigger picture for a second. The purpose of all of this is to help tell the board whether or not we're on track to the goals that the board set. If the goal that we really care about is the one about Algebra 1 first-time test takers, and if in this cohort we lose some students to advanced math, shouldn't they also pick up kids from the previous cohort who are now, quote unquote, in this cohort because they're in advanced math from the next year? And if that's true, shouldn't those numbers come through here? And again, the reason all of that matters isn't so much whether it's this decimal point or that decimal point, it's can we as a board, with our administrative team, accurately get visibility into where we're gonna land at the end of the year ahead of time so that we can make adjustments and be responsible stewards of public money. And so I think with all of this, I'm just I'm increasingly concerned about our ability to forecast accurately whether the things that we're doing are working or not. So I'll just share that. We don't have to dwell on this longer, but I think just to bring this together with some of the conversations we're having about budget, I think that, you know, regardless of which kids we're counting and who is in which math class, if barely 17, or not even 17% of these 8th graders are on grade level, we have an enormous amount of work that we need to do. We are going to be working in a budget context where we are severely constrained by the dollars that we have to invest. And as I've been looking about these numbers and thinking about our most recent budget conversations, for me, it's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer like what at least one board member thinks we should really put front and center when we allocate resources in that budget. And I just want to name 2 things. We can talk about that in the future meeting. But I think the very best way to help move these numbers is to make sure that teachers are using the curriculum that is very high in quality, that we have spent millions of dollars on in this district. And from what I understand, only about 40% of math classrooms are not using the curriculum that we have purchased. And 75% of ELA classrooms are not using the curriculum that we purchased. So whatever we're going to whatever it takes to make a difference on those numbers, that's what's going to change this from 16.8% of 8th graders on grade level to something that's much higher. So I hope we can talk more about this in future meetings, but I appreciate the time spent on this topic. Care a lot about forecasting, think we can get stronger there, and want us to focus on how we can make sure the curriculum we have purchased and that will work is being used faithfully in classrooms. Thank you.
So thank you, Board Member Lindy. I think also, to be fair to the administration, Mr. Chambers, I know you stood there, and we send out the request for board matters, inquiries, and updates, asking board members to put via email what it is that they want to see, so that our administration is prepared and can provide us with the information timely. I think it would have been better to have the data as a presentation here that we could see, and it would have been a little fairer for everyone to know what we're talking about rather than just via email. So I'm going to ask the board members, if you do have the need for presentations or the need for data, to just send that email so that we can get the administration to provide us with the information via presentation and slides, and so that the public can know what we're talking about, and we're not just having administration stand here and speak about things that the public hasn't seen, and maybe some board members haven't even seen as well. So, Mr. Lindy, would you like more information around what you've requested via email and brought up previously? Because it's an academic topic, we can talk about it at a board meeting, the next one at our old business, or we can talk about it at the next SACAL for sure. But I want them to be prepared so that we can see what it is. Because you bring up very valid points, but everybody doesn't know what we're talking about with regard to the public. So would you like them to come back and put that on either the 21st or the next SACAL meeting?
I have no strong preference. The thing I care strongly about is that as we talk about the budget, we talk about what is our strategy to make sure that we are getting the curriculum used across all or almost all the classrooms. That's the only request I have at the moment.
Okay. Any other board member questions, comments, or concerns? All right. Superintendent Murphy, thank you, Mr. Chambers. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our final presentation.
Absolutely. So we will have our Deputy Dr. Alicia Smith talk to us again about moving from Iowa to iReady, which was a recommendation that came forth a couple of meetings ago. Did I mess up?
No, turn around. You got. Maybe it's a
Mrs.
two-for
Vargo. Mrs.
presentation.
Vargo.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, Superintendent, Treasurer, members of the board. So I am very pleased to be able to talk to you all today about a recommendation from the Testing Review Committee that we have put together this year. So hit the next slide, Rob. So the Testing Review Committee is actually part of the collective bargaining agreement with CFT. So myself and Kendra, who I saw back there, co-facilitated this year. So we had 37 members of the committee that volunteered to take a look at a variety of topics related to testing this year. We had teachers, intervention specialists, reading specialists, ELL teachers, counselors, and principals. We conducted 3 90-minute meetings and then had some additional communications via email. And we looked at 4 key areas, and one of which I'm going to talk to you all about today. The next slide. So we weren't just talking about this topic. We knew we're going to kind of be the hot topic, but we looked at 4 topics, and all of these kind of came out of either questions or concerns from the field related to testing. We looked at our superior cognitive giftedness screening assessment. We looked at the alignment between giving PSAT as kind of like a pre-test in 10th and 11th grade to giving ACT as our state-sponsored assessment. We looked at our early literacy assessments, and then lastly, we looked at the topic we're going to talk about today, which is the Walnut Hills entrance exam. But I just want to kind of couch it in that context for you all, kind of the purpose behind the committee and the things that we looked at this particular year. Okay, you can go ahead and hit the next slide. So our current practice, as most of you know, is that all of our CPS 6th graders are administered the Iowa assessments, and then we use their national percentile rank in their reading and math to determine their eligibility for Walnut Hills in their 7th grade year. And our 6th grade students also take nationally normed reading and math assessments in the iReady assessments. So the purpose of the evaluation was to look at whether or not iReady could be our diagnostic assessment, be our achievement and growth assessment, and also kind of fill this need of serving as our Walnut Hills entrance exam as well to try to reduce testing. And so after we had a variety of awesome discussions and looked at a lot of data around this, the committee does recommend switching from using the Iowa assessments to using the iReady diagnostic assessments as what we call the affectionately, Walnut Hills entrance exam for our CPS 6th graders. At this time, we're not making any recommendations to changing kind of our Saturday paper pencil tests for our non-CPS students or our students in grade 7 and above. So we looked at the data. We actually have 2 years of data. Rob, if you could actually just click the link for the full data set, if you wouldn't mind. So we sliced and diced this a lot of ways. I'm a big data nerd, and so we really wanted to see, kind of the overall effect of doing a side-by-side comparison. And this is a pretty unique situation in which we have two full years of data sets of the same kids taking these 2 different assessments. It was kind of a cool opportunity to look at the data in this way because we don't often get to do that when we're evaluating a new product or a new assessment. So I want to put these 2 years side by side in this particular view. So in both years, both the 23-24 school year and the 24-25 school year, we see more students eligible using the same criteria with our iReady assessments. We see all the subgroups benefit. The reason I wanted to put these 2 side by side is because this year, iReady released their post-pandemic norms, and so we see a bigger increase in the number of kids that qualified, I'm using qualified loosely, but on the same criteria, with iReady this year. Iowa is going to release their post-pandemic norms next year. So we anticipate that the number of kids qualifying with Iowa will come up as well. The reason for this is because nationally, we're seeing achievement go down. And so when we're talking about national percentile ranks, to get to the 65th percentile, lower scale scores are getting there. And so there were more kids that qualified in the 23-24 year, both using pre-pandemic norms, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. We see a much bigger jump this year, but that was due to the release of the post-pandemic norms. So I just kind of wanted to call out those differences, that it's not as dramatic as it looks in just looking at the 1 year of data. Okay, can you go back to the deck if you don't mind? Okay, so just kind of a summary of the reasoning for the recommendation. Using iReady instead of the Iowa for our CPS sixth graders yields a higher and more diverse population of eligible students. Using iReady benefits all subgroups of students. Using iReady, this is a big one, it allows 2 opportunities for students to qualify for Walnut Hills without doing anything. Right now, families have to sign their students up for the second opportunity. Those kids are pulled out of class. You know, schools have to find a proctor or proctors depending on the size of kids. So this just, everybody gets 2 opportunities. All school models had more kids qualify using iReady versus the Iowa. Another really big one is that iReady is renormed every 4 to 5 years. The Iowa test has not had new norms since 2017, so currently that's based on the 15-16 school year. They're planning to release new norms this fall, but that would be 8 years between norming periods, which is longer than what we would want to see. And then another big one is that if we eliminate Iowa testing, it'll save us over $40,000 as a district, and well over 2.5 hours of testing time for those kids who just test that one time. Questions?
Do board members, board member Craig.
So thank you for bringing this presentation to us. I know, we had a little bit of this conversation, whether I think it was either last meeting or the meeting before, but get some of this information. I want to maybe dive into 2 parts. And so one is the number of folks who get in. And we've had this conversation before when we talked about when we moved to the Iowa and other situations. It's not always about the number of students who get in, but it's the number of students who have the skill sets that once they're there, they stay. And so I just wanted to kind of dive into how we're thinking about that, or how we're looking at the performance expectations on those students who would not have gotten in otherwise, but now would. Kind of how we're preparing that, how we're addressing students who may certainly have performed on the iReady assessments well, but are we able to better understand how those students might perform while at the school? Because I think that's another part of the assessment process, and that was something we talked about before. So I don't know if there's any thoughts you all have had around that aspect.
So I don't know that I have an answer or a thought around that. I think soft skills are hard to measure, right? I think you can have a kid who scores incredibly high on whether it's Iowa or iReady and still will not be successful at Walnut. So I don't know that, I think, kind of our charge as a testing review committee was to look at our current practices around assessment and make recommendations that made sense for children and for equity. So I do think that is something that's worth looking at, but I think we're gonna have that same discussion whether or not we move to Iowa. I do think it's a valid conversation to have.
Yeah, and again, I think about this in part because I know students who've taken Iowa tests, and part of the issue they raised was I wasn't taught the materials prior to me getting that second opportunity to take the Iowa test. And so if we're having folks who we're assessing who may not have still learned the information that is kind of expected, that's something we should know. Certainly it's something we'd be able to deal with, but I don't know that we'll know that until we know it, really. The second part is that we also are comparing, we also have this is only for students who are CPS students.
Correct.
So every other student who would be wanting to make that trip they would be on a different scale or a different standard because they would be using the Iowa test still, right?
So the tests would be different. The scale and the criteria would be the same, which is the 65th percentile. And I think that's the whole point of kind of norming is any differences in the test largely kind of wash themselves out in the norming process if it is a large, rigorous, nationally normed, which both of these tests in both of these companies are. If one test were, say, easier than the other, you would have to get a higher score to get that same percentile. So it's not something I, who lives in the assessment world, am concerned about necessarily. It's not something that the testing review committee was concerned about because we're using the same criteria. And we actually have a precedent for the, kids who get into Spencer and Cheviot, they can come with outside tests using the same types of criteria. So we do actually have a precedent for doing something like this in the district.
I just think it would be something we would want to monitor, though, again, comparative expectations and results. So, like, again, while they are normative, we know that there's difference in what the results would be given the two different tests, even within our own CPS students, right? So we know there's a greater number of students who would qualify, and it may be for various reasons that using the iReady processes, there are other things that iReady offers that might provide more students comfort in their ability to take the test. There's a lot of other factors that might be a part of that, but I think it'd be worth us monitoring this, though, because I do have the concern that if we are strictly changing the testing simply to get more folks to qualify to get in, I think there's an aspect of what you do once you're there that has to be something we would keep an eye on in that vein. The only other point that I would make, I think, again, I appreciate the fact that there is a cost savings to this process. So again, I think that is something that we have to be thinking about in a year where we are going to have to make cuts and changes and everything else. What's the expectation for how we would communicate this out to parents going forward about their understanding of the process of getting their kid into Walnut? Because I think that's the other part that is still part of the difficulty, is that I don't know that parents always understand what they have to do or what that process looks like.
I think that's a very valid point. And I think whatever the decision is around this, it is something that a communication plan around making sure, particularly our CPS 6th grade families, have the information they need to advocate for their kid is definitely something that's on the radar.
Let's just go down the line. Board Member Weinberg.
All right, how are you today?
I'm well.
So I had lots of questions from the last time, and so I kind of eliminated some of the questions based off of what was provided in this lovely, lovely presentation. I did a little bit of research myself, and I kind of wanted to kind of see your thoughts, or just hear, also from the administration as well. There are some pros and cons to both of the tests, obviously the Iowa versus the iReady. I'll start with my questions first, and then I'll go to the pros and cons, and then kind of hear what you think. The one thing that I know you said that there was a cost savings. How much does it officially cost to administer the Iowa? What is the cost to the district?
I believe it is $16.90 per license. So we would maintain some licenses, and we would maintain some licenses because we do, Iowas are given for referral for science and social studies gifted testing. And then we also do some Logramos testing, which is a Spanish trans-adapted test. And so we would not want our ELL students to not have that opportunity to participate in that test. So I believe when I did the math, I'm going off the top of my head, I think it was just under $41,000 if we maintain some of our licenses.
So not maintaining, my question is, how much did it cost for us to do it in general? What was the cost? So not if we maintain some of it, what's the cost to the district?
The contract, but that included also our superior cognitive assessment.
That's fine, just everything in general, what was the cost?
I don't want to say the wrong number.
And if you don't have it, that's fine.
I think it was 96, but I can get an exact number
So like
for you.
possibly 96,000? Is that what you're?
Yes, but some of that went to our superior cog screening,
And
which
that's
is state
fine.
mandated.
So if it's about 96,000, you're saying that we would have a cost saving of about 40,000? Is what you're thinking? Okay, that's fine. And then in terms of with the Saturday non-CPS students, you don't want to have a change for that. You want to stick with the paper and pencil for those particular students, and what's the rationale for that?
Simply the logistics of testing on a Saturday. So iReady is adaptive. It cannot be given paper pencil. It can only be given on the computer. Bringing in 300 non-CPS students, having devices, getting them logged in, tech support if anything goes down, Wi-Fi goes down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on a portion of the slideshow, you showed an increased number of students who would now be eligible. How will that equate to the capacity at Walnut Hills? Currently, they are
So that is
overcrowded.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
currently they're overcrowded, and so what would be the plan moving forward? And let's say we do go forth with this suggestion, which, you know, I'm open to seeing it either way it goes, but what would be the plan moving forward? So,
So I think that's absolutely a conversation that needs to be had. Like, we were simply looking at testing equity and practices, aware that there are obviously implications for this. So I think that's a little beyond the scope of what we looked at there, but definitely a conversation that absolutely needs to be had.
okay. And then in terms of, you were talking about a little bit of the makeup of the test. So when I did the little research or whatever, Iowa is a standard national norm test, and then with the iReady, it's a diagnostic in which it adapts. So did you all take into consideration, I'm assuming with the committee, to think about that when they answer the questions wrong, it gets a little easier, so forth? Can you kind of go a little bit into that?
Yeah, so so because they're nationally normed, that's where a lot of the differences in the test wash out. So a kid that scores at the 65th percentile on an iReady is getting the level of questions where this, you know, they're scoring better than 65% of same age peers who took that test nationally, versus a kid in iReady. The norming process is the same. It's just the questions that they're getting are going to be different. But the score that is generated is then looked at on the scale of norming, and, you know, we're saying they scored better than 65% of their same age peers.
And just as a reminder for the public, and I'm asking a lot of these questions because parents reached out and they had concerns, and what would be the score that you would suggest that we would go with? Is it the 140?
So what we looked at did not take into consideration any changes in the criteria.
Okay.
So it would be a minimum score of the 65th percentile in reading, minimum score of the 65th percentile in math, and then when you add those two together, it's a composite score of 140. So 65 and 65 together, you know, alone is not enough. One of those at least has to be high enough to get the 140. So
Okay.
we didn't have a discussion about changing the criteria.
And it would be compared to originally taking the 95th percentile in the last test.
This is the same criteria for iReady, or I'm sorry, for the Iowa. It's 65, 65, and a composite of 140.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other, Board Member Lundy?
Thank you very much. I think Mrs. Weinberg asked the capacity question, which is one of the ones I wanted to ask. But I think I just, two things. One is, in 5.5 years, I don't know that I can remember a presentation that says this will improve the diversity of the student body, get us more accurate, better normed information, cost us less, reduce the amount of testing that we do with children. This is a shockingly high number of wins in the proposal and presentation, which I'm not used to, and that's great. So thank you very much. And there's no but at the end of this. It's just great. I think my only question was what's helpful from the board tonight?
I mean, I don't know. I think we would love some direction to be able to move forward and continue the conversation, because there are logistical things that need to be decided if we're going to move forward next year.
Yes.
And so or maybe the superintendent, so what can I share that would be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Your where you are with this, your support, the direction, move forward, don't move forward. There are more questions we would like to have answered. We would like to be able to begin to move forward. We want to see what your pulse is.
One more thing I just want to throw out there that I didn't really talk about. The reason this kind of got on the radar to start looking at initially is because the platform that the Iowa test is administered on for years has been awful. It's incredibly user-friendly. It's terrible for kids to log into. It crashes constantly. We had to suspend testing like right in the middle of the window for a week. So we kind of started the wheels turning of, you know, is there something better out there? And then we were like, wait a minute, we're already giving a test that does these same things. So it's 2.5 hours of testing time for kids, but the actual time that is lost trying to administer this test is significantly higher than that. So I did want to kind of throw that out there because that is kind of how this came to be something we explored, is because it's a really just straight up bad experience in the schools for our teachers and our students.
Thank you. I know Mrs. Weinberg has one follow-up because she asked me to ask it, so really quickly.
What did I ask you to ask? I forgot.
When
already,
do you
'cause I
want
had
this to
another
go into
one.
effect?
Oh, and then one more. You mentioned about crashing. So iReady crashes too. So do we have a plan for that as well?
So yes, we do, and we have some more flexibility with iReady because it's not a timed test also. And I will tell you, so I've been sitting in this seat for 5 years. Riverside Data Manager Platform has crashed significantly more times than iReady has in the 5 years I've been sitting in this seat. So
Thanks.
everything's going to crash at some point. This one consistently crashes.
Superintendent Murphy, when were you wanting this to be in effect?
The upcoming school year, if possible.
Board Member Matt?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I love the fact that you're highlighting the equity and access piece for all of our students. And just thank you again for the presentation, very detailed information.
Awesome, thank you.
Vice President Weinberg? Oh, Lord, jeez. Vice President Bolton?
Thank you.
No, you don't.
It's an upgrade for me. I'm liking that. I appreciate the presentation. I particularly appreciated the memo that was out there circulating in the district about why to do this. I'm also very predisposed to, and I think people will remember this from a couple of years ago, I'm not an Iowa fan at all. But that's not a reason not to do it unless there's something actually better, and to have the actual professionals who are the experts do the research, tell us what is needed and what you think is best, helps me. I like to be able to defer where the expertise is on these particular matters, and I appreciate it. So I'm very much in favor of moving along as to what you all are suggesting and recommending. And I wasn't necessarily predisposed to do so until I read that kind of circulated essay or memo out there that someone gave me. But the presentation's great, but the memo was even clearer for my way of processing information. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Board Member Crossan?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, the data, the analysis, it's great. I just want to reiterate, and this is more for maybe Superintendent Murphy, but school capacity is, got to be addressed.
Board Member Weinberg?
Well, one last question. So as we're moving forward, and I know Board Member Craig brought this up in terms of communication to parents, one thing that I did like about the slide is where you showed the total number of eligible students, and then you broke it down, obviously, by race. And just seeing that there was a rise with our African-American students, and then also seeing that there was a rise with everything else. What would be, or how would the plan go moving forward as students are introduced to this test? Would there be a letter going out? Would there be something really big explaining we have something new that we're starting? Like, what would be the communication plan? Because this would be obviously something exciting and different and new,
Yes, ma'am.
and I want to make sure that parents understand and students.
Well, we will definitely create a very robust communication plan, and it really fits well with the excitement we're building and momentum around a new era of being able to provide the best services for our kids, and so we would really make this a big deal. We're
great.
open to suggestions.
Thank you. I think this is a great presentation. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and the data was very succinct. I am concerned about, naturally, I'm concerned about just overcrowding. However, I'm reminded, just as I'm listening to everyone else's questions, that we have a large number of students that qualify to get into Walnut but don't choose to go.
Yeah.
And so I know of 2 students at Winton Hill. I was just there with a book club, and 2 of their 6th graders just chose not to go, but they qualified, and their teachers were heartbroken that they wouldn't choose it. So that may end up working itself out. But I am very concerned around engagement. I'm concerned about matriculation. I think it's very great to have the ability to say, oh, we have this many students that qualify to get in, but I do know we need to do a different and better job with regard to engaging parents.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that they have said, is that they feel like they need a little bit more information and a little bit more engagement around that. So I would invite the administration to take this opportunity to work on matriculation of students that since we're liking to give the nod to this, to do some different things around getting parents informed and engaged around the new innovativeness of the ability to attend. Do board members have any other questions? Board Member Craig.
I would just add, I think it's great to do stuff that is certainly innovative and helps. What I would stress is that we make sure that as we're doing that, we think about the entirety of that strategy, right? And so that strategy can't just stop at what the test is. That strategy is to think about how our students are performing, how our students are being supported, but then also things like overcrowding and other factors of how we would align, because if we do have a change in how people view Walnut, or change in how some parents view Walnut, that they would want to send their kid where they may not have been passed on, or changes in how people decide to test take with their kid, or those type of things, we could see a higher influx. And so I just think those are things that we have to be prepared for and have a plan for and to address. Again, the same thing with regards to communicating it out, because I think that is, I mean, I remember several meetings where we've had parents reach out and ask questions about whether or not their kid gets into Walnut, and at a committee meeting even, and it didn't always make sense that they were reaching out to us when we have little to no effect on that process whatsoever. So I just think as much as we can get a clear picture that's bigger than just the test, that would be helpful.
All righty. The Vice President Bolton.
Sorry, because you all just, the kind of gave me an idea to be concerned about. The capacity piece is true. We did significantly reduce some years ago the number of students that were at Walnut, in part when we switched over to Iowa. I think it was in the hundreds that we lost in those couple of years, in part. So it's overcrowded now, but it took even more kids several years ago than it is taking now. This is I hate to say it, a product that the district wants, is a Walnut education. And I think it's important for the district to be able to offer that product to people that qualify to participate in that product. And to the idea of growth and capacity, there are some things that have changed. Spencer is on the move and has room to grow. That can impact the Walnut Hills experience for many kids. The fact that we are committed to expanding the Montessori piece also begins to help reduce some of the pressures that would be there for Walnut, because maybe 10 years ago, it was Walnut or it was Walnut. So I think there's just, we've packaged and created a different environment, different competitive environment for it. But I think the data that you've presented, again, is outstanding.
Thank you. I'm going to remind board members, it's 5:29. Yes,
I'm
Board
just
Member
going to
Mack.
say, it's just a comment, just in listening to everyone's feedback or questions. You know, I think in terms of what Board Member Bolton stated, that this is a good product to have, but I just wanted to highlight that I think this should be the standard for all of our high schools, right?
Sure.
And so if we're talking about strategy and preparation, thinking through how we're preparing all of our students to be successful at any high school that they attend.
But they don't all have to be Walnuts.
I agree.
Thank God.
I agree. The chair will entertain a motion for adjournment. Before that, Rob, I do have a question around the link to the joint meeting. Is it going to be the same link for people to log in for the joint meeting?
We're going to test Zoom in between the break to see if we can bring the link that was shared publicly already. So we'll attempt to do that. If not, it will still be that link. That link also still leads to YouTube regularly whenever we go live.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. We are going to adjourn I need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Well, it said, I think we have to do the motion. Jen, do we have to do the motion to adjourn and then the motion to adjourn in an exec session separately? Okay, a
No,
motion.
just a motion to recess into executive session for the purpose of,
Pending litigation. And a motion and a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Crossan,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg,
Yes.
Vice President Bolton, President Moffitt.
Yes, and then we will adjourn out of that meeting and recess into the CPS and City of Cincinnati Healthy Neighborhoods Joint Committee meeting. I do need to know how many board members are attending that meeting so Rob can set it up. 1, 2.